What the Tech is sponsored by Win Connections, October 29th to November 1st at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. Save $100 by using promo code TECH100 when registering. For more information, go to winconnections.com. Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks, with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature. For a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ.
What's the tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech on this amazingly beautiful Tuesday afternoon. I'm broadcasting live from New York City, Paul. How you doing, Paul? Why is that funny? I'm trying to be professional.
Where else would you be broadcasting live from?
I don't know, Gush Katif.
I like the way you presented that as if it was information for me. You know, oh, is that where you've been all this time?
Live from the Gaza Strip. Finally broadcasting from Gaza. This is What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. I'm joined by Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing well.
Doing well today.
Better than you, I guess.
Yeah, I'm having a bad bad week. I blew up my back last Wednesday coming back from Manhattan. Paul was in town, and we had a couple drinks.
That's a tenuous connection at best.
You were in town. We hung out. Mary Jo was with us.
Mm-hmm.
We drank. We had oysters.
We did, yeah.
You forced me to have oysters, which I liked, actually. It was really good.
I almost begged you not to have oysters.
You did?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was...
I was nervous you were going to like them.
And I did.
And you did.
I did.
Yeah.
Then you left, and Mary Jo and I continued drinking.
And man, I just barely made it, too.
Yeah. And, you know, it got a little weird because, like, I got a little too drunk. And I know Mary, but like we're not like we've hung out a couple times when you've been there. Like we've never hung out alone.
Sure.
And I was getting really loaded by the end.
Yeah.
And I did this really uncomfortable hug handshake at the same time with her because I was so out of my mind.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable.
I've done that.
I'm sure for her too.
Yeah.
But I got home and I hurt my back and I've been suffering since.
And that's just karma in action.
I know. You know what I did right after? You know, we had the oysters and I'm walking back home. I got on the train. I made it like right on time. It was a quick ride. And there's a McDonald's right, you know, where I get dropped off where the train leaves me. I ordered $38 worth of McDonald's. And I proceeded to eat it on my way home. So I'm walking and I'm just eating cheeseburger after cheeseburger.
Right, which is an appropriate response if you've had too much to drink.
Yeah, at lunch.
I probably spent like $200 on sushi that night.
Oh, it was good. It was fun. I had a lot of fun. You were in town for the HTC event, which I was surprised. You know, they didn't really make a big deal that it was a Windows event until like the last minute.
I told Mary Jo before the show, I said, I guarantee you that this thing is going to be 78, you know, I'm 75 to 80% Android, and then there's going to be some little mention of Windows 8, Windows Phone 8 at the end. And I just assuming that there was no way these guys were having just a Windows 8. Oh, geez, why do I keep doing that? Windows Phone 8 event. And then it was all Windows Phone 8, and more to the point, it was awesome.
And Balmer was there.
Yeah, Balmer was there too. Yep.
Which I was surprised when you guys told me.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
You know, no, I was out of town for the other events. I would have gone to the Nokia event if I could have, for example, but I was in New Zealand. And, you know, I just sort of looked at this like, well, it's something I have to do. It's Windows Phone. And I went into it. I mean, no expectations is not even fair. I went into it with really low expectations. I just thought, well, you know, whatever. I'll take some pictures and write an article and I'll be done. And I was blown away.
You thought it was just going to be like one of the Samsung phones that was out.
Yeah. In other words, they take whatever their phone is, the 1X, put a new skin on it, throw Windows Phone 8 on there. We have a new phone, you know, exactly like Samsung does. And, you know, frankly, that would have been okay. right? And it's interesting because they didn't do that. It has caused me to reassess what's going on here. Where I think in the past I was maybe a little too accepting of the lot in life that we have as Windows Phone users. That these big cell phone companies, Samsung and HTC primarily, have these other devices that they sell in volume running Android, and I'm just happy they make a Windows Phone version of it. That's fine. And the Samsung devices, I've used all of them, have all been fantastic. So it hasn't really bothered me that much. And then, the Lumia stuff, the Nokia phones, have always been held up as the really kind of the high-end, really nice ones.
It's it's the flagship device. I mean, that's what it's been presented as.
The thing is, and I don't know if I've said this to you, but I know I've been telling people this recently. I have all my old Windows phones, and so one of the things I did over the past couple of weeks or whatever was, for whatever reason, I went back and I grabbed the previous phone I was using, which is a Samsung Focus S, which is sort of like, it's probably like a Galaxy S2 hardware type machine. It's got 4G but not LTE. But when you have these two devices side by side, the Lumia 900 and the Focus S is half as thick. It weighs, it feels like it's half as heavy. It's probably more than that. But the difference between them is astonishing. The Lumia, I sort of figured, well, it's a big screen device, which doesn't bother me, but it's really big, thick, and heavy. And of course, the camera was disappointing. And so in many ways, the Lumia has ultimately been sort of disappointing because I looked to them as that kind of high-end luxury brand kind of thing. They always had that really good reputation for the optics and the cameras and everything. And that really hasn't panned out,
Yeah, which I'm surprised. I mean,
we all are.
I mean, when you look at the phone, the Lumia, the new ones, let's talk about the new ones.
Yeah.
It's a nice looking phone. You could tell they put work into this. The Lumia.
Well, you know what? Actually, I'm not even sure I would say that. So
really?
It's a nice looking phone, but it looks just like the 900.
Which I like the 900, yeah.
No, it's fine, but the 900 is the phone I use every single day. And to me, I'm going to get distracted by this chat room again. Yeah, it's only like 0.5 millimeters thicker, except on one part of it. You get the HTC has a tapered design. The Lumia is a brick. It's the same thickness basically across its entire
But the
body.
HTC, it's a thin device.
The HTC is wicked thin.
Yeah.
Wicked. And I have a picture on my website comparing my device, the Lumia 900, with this HTC 8X, which is the higher end version. Night and day. The 8X is really light, wicked thin. Screen is beautiful. And we'll have to see. Obviously, the camera for someone like me is a big deal. Other people care more about things like the storage amount and, they want to put videos and stuff on there, whatever. Everyone has different needs, obviously. But the current phone I have, the Lumia 900, has 16 gigs of storage. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised that HTC is putting all this effort on this device. I mean, they made a big deal out of it, and to me, this is kind of pointing at what we've been talking about for months now, and that's a lot of these companies are looking for another option other than Google.
Yeah, I mean,
what's HTC offering you that Motorola isn't and Samsung isn't? Nothing really.
Oh, you mean in the Android space?
In the Android, yeah.
Well, So this is why Nokia didn't go with Android, right? Because they would have been yet another player in this big market with lots of players, and so at that point, it all comes down to, personal preferences, which design you like, and that kind of thing. And it becomes kind of a commodity market. It's just like PCs. I mean, when you would walk into a Best Buy 5 years ago and look at a bunch of tower PCs, I mean, which one did you buy? You bought the one that was like cheapest but had all the stuff you want. I mean, they were all sort of, basically the same. And these smartphones are all basically sort of the same. I think that's why the HTC stuff is so interesting. Because it is kind of a breath of fresh air. It's not the same device rebranded with Windows Phone 8. It's something completely new, and they're just beautiful looking. And
now there's two HTC devices. What's the difference between them?
So there are actually a lot of differences. I happen to prefer the look of the lower end one to the look of the higher end one, which is kind of strange. But the lower end one really kind of cheaps out on the specs so much that I can't possibly consider it. So it has an 800 by 480 screen versus HD on the high-end one. It has, I think it's only 4 gigs of storage, which I didn't think was possible, compared to 16 for the higher end one. Has a 5 megapixel camera instead of the 8 megapixel on the higher end one, and not all of the excellent optics and image stabilization, all the extra stuff that you get on the high end version of the phone. So, and there are probably other differences, obviously. But
and people are praising the camera on this thing.
Yeah.
On the HTC, they were saying, "Wow, it's actually quite impressive."
We'll see. I mean, again, it's very easy to pick up like I did last fall, I guess this spring, and say, here's an iPhone 4S, here's a Lumia 900, here's a whatever. Let's compare the cameras. This fall, I will do that with this phone, with the Lumia 920, with the Samsung, and with the iPhone 5, and we'll see. Because this is how you make these determinations. Now, for some, and you have to go outside, you have to go inside. We'll just test it, and we'll see what it's like in the real world. The camera is only part of it, right? I mean, when I look at smartphones for myself personally and the recommendations that I make, I mean, I happen to think that the Windows Phone OS is superior to anything from Android on the Android side or iOS. Personally, I think that the ecosystem stuff is obviously all over the map. It depends on what's important to you. I mean, if you care, if apps are like the biggest thing in the world to you, obviously Android or iPhone have more apps. But I actually think that the integration stuff in Windows Phone obviates the needs for a lot of apps. And I also think that there are enough apps. I mean, I just don't. I think we've reached the point where that kind of argument is just going away. It's just stupid.
Engadget had an interesting article today, and they did a comparison of the image stabilization on the iPhone 5 and the Lumia 920.
Okay.
And they took the two phones, and it was a pretty fair comparison. And I have to tell you, the camera on the 920, as far as video goes, was much better than the iPhone. And I was actually really surprised. And the image stabilization blows the iPhones away. I mean, it's
so
really.
What were they comparing though?
They took the iPhone 5 and the Lumia 920.
In other words, they actually had both of these phones.
Both of them at the Nokia headquarters.
Okay.
And they went outside and they put both of them together and they started walking, they started running, and you could see how the image stabilization is working on the Lumia compared to the iPhone 5.
I got you. And you're saying the Lumia was better.
Much better, yeah. It's a much wider wide-angled. It's a much wider lens also, so the shot is much wider than what the iPhone is doing, and I kind of like that. I like the wide-angle lenses.
I do too. That's actually one of the things I really like about the Lumia is you have the option for widescreen shots.
I mean, listen, and it's a matter of preference. I mean, some people don't like it, some people do.
All of this stuff is, that's the thing. I mean, you can't. There's no way to come out and say this one's better.
I know Andy Inako did a comparison between the iPhone 4S and the iPhone 5, and he posted it on his Facebook. I think it was on his Facebook. I saw somebody send me a link to it today. And I have to tell you, the iPhone 5 is a better camera, but when you compare like 4 shots next to each other, they all start to blur. Like they all blend in.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if that's the case, then those cameras aren't that different from each other. And there are 2 points to say to that. One is that when I did the test this spring, which was a Titan 2, a Lumia 900, and the iPhone 4S, there were, obviously different cameras do things well in different situations. And so there were some pitches where you had to really go back and forth and say, it's kind of close, But there were many where the iPhone 4S in this particular case was just head and shoulders over everything else. And so it was pretty obvious that the 4S was better. Now, the other thing, though, is that the iPhone 4S was the best camera of that generation. And so it's not horrible that the iPhone 5 doesn't have that much better of a camera. It was already the best camera.
It was already, I mean...
obviously we need to compare it to things like the shipping Android phones of the day, the Galaxy S3, the One X, and then the Windows Phone devices that are coming out for Windows Phone 8.
But you know what else, Paul? I think a lot of people don't know how to take pictures, and that. Like my wife. You know what? But
we shouldn't have to know how. See, that's the point. You have the thing in your pocket. Something's happening. You want to take a picture. You take it out. You take a picture. That should just work. And you know what? That almost never works.
No, it never does.
Especially if you're inside. Especially if it's dark. If it's a crystal clear blue sky day with no clouds, that picture's going to look great.
Absolutely
even
great,
if you have a feature phone, it's going to look beautiful. You we're on Facebook, right? So when we went to France last month, our friend comes out and she's a photographer and she has like a real camera, like an SLR with lenses and everything. And she gave us a photo she took of my kids at the Eiffel Tower, which you might have seen. I just put it up the other day. that picture is beautiful in ways that no smartphone picture can ever be. It just has a depth of field to it, a clarity. It looks, you forget that pictures can be this good.
I know, and that's the thing. And sometimes when you see it, you're shocked.
Yes, and so I think most people today take pictures on phones, and that's what they're used to. I happen to keep a point-and-click camera, and I don't carry it with me every day, but when I go on a big trip like to France, obviously, I take that camera and I take pictures with that. But then you got to remember there's a step above that, and that's when you get into these really expensive SLRs with all the lenses and everything. That's something I used to do when I was younger. I don't bother anymore, but every once in a while I see a picture like that, one of my kids, and I think, okay, this is why you do stuff like this. I mean, these pictures are amazing.
My wife has the iPhone 4S, and I tell her, I'm like, you could have a perfect scenario, and you'll still screw up a picture. She's just awful with it, and she does one of these. She'll be like, okay, hang on, and she'll move the camera as soon as she hits the button. So it's this giant blur that she gets, so every picture's blurry.
But that's a factor of it's not taking the picture fast enough, right? So she thinks she's taking it, she's already moving. And the camera doesn't accommodate what is frankly just basic human behavior.
Yeah. Well, most point and shoots, like lower end point and shoot cameras, they're not that great at that either.
Sure. No,
I mean, unless you got a nice Canon, point and shoot, which that's pretty much what I buy when I'm buying a point and shoot. I feel that when you hit the trigger to kind of take the picture, it actually takes the picture, while other cameras.
This camera that I have has a 20x optical zoom.
Wow.
And it's just it's widescreen.
What camera is it?
It's a Panasonic. It's a newer version of one that I had in the past, DMC. It's got terrible names, of course, they always do. Like DMC Z250, but it's got GPS built into it, whatever. It's probably a couple $100. It's not, it's for a point and shoot kind of thing, it's actually kind of big and thick. It's kind of a big camera, because it would have to be for those kind of optics. But, it's only 1,000,000 times better than any smartphone camera, so that's why I have it. Anyway, this is a long conversation about stuff that's not really related to the topic.
I know.
Sorry.
Well, now I got my cameras to show it off. I use for a point and shoot, I have an SD960. Canon.
Yeah, classic Canon.
It's amazing, and the HD video on this thing is amazing. Just really good optics on it, and I have an Icon D60. That's my SLR.
Yeah,
and that's it. I'm happy with it. But how many times if you ask me how many times I use both of these, I would probably tell you maybe 4 times this year.
Sure.
I mean, that's about it.
It's a wonderful luxury we have that, we're out in the world every day with a device where we can take a picture of any kind, right? So that's nice. The problem is once you get exposed to that kind of thing, you always want it to be better. There's always a complaint.
Yeah.
And I would say, I think the iPhone 4S was the first one where it kind of crossed the line where it was good enough for most cases. I mean,
do you think we're there? Do you think we don't need point and shoots anymore?
No, not quite. But, no, not quite. But I think for many people, that question almost doesn't matter because they're already just using their phones anyway. And we are making that crossover to a point in time where, the iPhone 5 perhaps, I've not tried it yet, or the Lumia 920 perhaps, the HTC Windows Phone 8X maybe, the Samsung Galaxy S3 possibly, are right there where it's the right combination of not just quantity of pixels, but also quality and the other capabilities you have to build into the device for those pictures to actually make sense. We're there. We're like right there.
I mean, we're going to need
it's
some
like the
sort
MP3 thing, right? I mean, I was just listening to an interview with a recording artist who was saying, he was actually making fun of people like you or I. He said something like, have you ever seen the people who made the internet? They're nerds. These are people who sit in front of screens all day long and they never get outside and do anything physical. They're never active. I don't want my music listened to on a phone. I designed it for stereo. He said, you want to do something luxurious for your kids? Go buy a stereo with an actual turntable on it and play an album on it and have them suddenly understand how good something can sound.
Oh my God.
So that comparison to digital music is much like this comparison that we're having to camera phones.
No,
right?
you're absolutely right. And even talk and it's interesting you brought that up because I think for certain situations, we've kind of adapted this luxury where, okay, I can take a picture with this and I don't need to have 4 devices, but I'm giving up on something. And that kind of works with internet broadcasting also. For people who don't know, I co-founded the International Association of Internet Broadcasters. Shameless plug there, ibroadcastnetwork.org. And we have a forum there. And somebody put an interesting post up. He goes, I've been doing this for a little while, and whenever I listen to my show on a TV or in the car, it sounds awful. Why doesn't it sound like radio? And we have a guy that actually is a radio engineer, and he told him that the internet, the processing that's done on the audio for radio is specifically made for a car. So that's why it sounds good in the car, even though you're not getting high bit rate like you would with, what we're doing. It's processed for the car. Television is the same way. Those microphones are processed to be on a TV and to fill a room. We don't have that because we're not using thousands of dollars worth of processing. But it is getting there.
It will get there. And because you're starting to see services bundled into cars like Pandora and things like that, I mean, they're coming around to this notion of, how hard would it be to build the electronics in the vehicle just to accommodate the compressed audio that occurs, over. I had an interesting
over
the internet.
I think it's going to be up to the services like Pandora and Stitcher. I had an interesting conversation with the CEO of Stitcher. I interviewed him, and he said that is something that they're working on because that's the biggest complaint, that there's no oomph behind the audio for internet broadcast because it's being compressed. The internet, and it's this going through so many pipes, and they're taking a 128 kilobit stream and they're making it into 32, and then they're pumping it out. So the next thing they're looking for is certain type of compression for vehicles. So they could do the processing on their end, and it's a lot easier for them to do it. But I found it very interesting that there's different methods behind it. It's not just putting it out, and I think that's what we're used to. The same goes for the camera.
Andrew, I need to interrupt you because someone is desperate to hear my opinion about the Beats amplifier and the HTC.
Okay, please. And he's getting kicked anyway, so.
All right, so let me answer his question.
Yeah.
It was great. My son has Beats headphones, right? My take on those is that they are essentially kind of bass heavy, which I think is a standard complaint against those headphones, those and similar headphones. When I travel, I use these Bose noise canceling over the ear headphones, and I love that kind of thing. Some people love Beats headphones, and some people don't. So at the show, what they had was there's a Beats amplifier built into the 8X, and they had Beats headphones, but not the really big, can type headphones, but the kind of smaller over-the-ear models. And, you could listen to it with the Beats audio off, which sounded tinny and bad, or you could listen to it with, Beats audio on. There's basically just it's a switch, a software switch. And it sounded awesome.
Yeah.
It really sounded... It almost sounded analog in that it was very warm and deep, that kind of classic.
Hang on, which ones does he have? The big ones or the little ones?
Little ones.
Okay.
And it was it was music that I wouldn't normally listen to, but it was a live recording, and it was fantastic. It sounded fantastic. That said, with the exception of that Focus S, which was a one weird exception to this rule, most of the music playback experiences I've had on Windows Phone have been great. They're fine. It sounds fine. The Focus S, if you have one, you know what I'm talking about. There's a very strange problem with that phone where there's an audible pop as you go back and forth between songs. Yeah, it's horribly.
Is it always
distracting.
there with any kind of application?
It's a problem. It's a problem with the device. Yeah.
Huh.
Focus S, not a Focus. The regular Focus is fine, and the other Focus devices are fine too, like the Focus Flash, the original Focus. Actually, I think that's all of them. Those are all fine.
Very interesting. We have a lot to get to today, Paul. I do want to talk about the iPhone 5 numbers that were released over the weekend, and how some analysts were very disappointed in Apple. Very, very disappointed in Apple.
Actually, they were very disappointed in themselves.
Yeah.
I think it's the way to put it. But yeah.
But before we do, I do want to talk about our sponsor, something that Paul is involved with, and you're going to be involved with October, I think in November, right? Are you there the last day, or are you there early?
I haven't actually booked this yet because we're waiting on part of that trip. But there's a big trip coming up with a bunch of different stuff. So The Connection show, I believe, begins on November 1st, and I will be there. Is that not true?
October 29th to November 1st. Okay. That's what my copy says, unless my copy's wrong.
Maybe I'm thinking about when I'm going to be there. So that week is kind of busy. I'll be there, but I won't be there right at the beginning. So I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to get there. So let's look at the day. Let's look at the calendar and say that October 29th is a Monday. Really, it begins on that Monday. So I'll probably come in on Wednesday, which is the 31st, and then I'll be there for the 1st as well. And I believe that the session I'm doing, I believe it is on the 1st, but I'll need to check into that.
So what are you going to be speaking about at Win Connections? Because Win Connections is for developers and IT professionals to get acquainted with, professionals and people that are involved with, with Windows and with servers and with IT. And you're speaking there on a panel with Mary Jo.
Yeah.
What are you going to be talking about?
So this is going to be kind of interesting. It's probably going to be semi-informal. We finalized.
I would love to see you doing a formal.
Yeah. I told her today that I will try not to have this devolve into a stand-up routine, but it's billed as sort of about Windows 8, but really what it's going to be about is Windows 8 Plus, Office, and what comes next. And really, it's just an attempt to and if you think about it, this is really the mission for Connections when it comes down to it, which is, the Connections is not a Microsoft show. And what we have is a bunch of people who are actual experts out in the field that are out there doing this in the real world. And it's an attempt for people to, to learn from those kind of guys who are not Microsoft, who are not necessarily on message with what Microsoft wants you to know. And so obviously with Windows 8 launching right around that time, a lot of questions around Windows 8. And so what we want to do is present something that is, look, Microsoft isn't necessarily telling you what's going on, and so we'll do it. And so throw the questions and we'll tell you what's really happening.
And I think if there's any year to go, this is the year to go, because this is right around the time of Windows 8 coming out, and there's going to be a lot of questions that especially in the IT world, they're going to have, and developers are going to have, and you're going to be able to ask them.
I've had some interesting interactions with IT pros. There was a show we did a few years ago where, we talked to them about the cloud, and the IT pro audience for this discussion, it was like a funeral, because for these guys, the cloud is like their job's going away. And then in another room, we had a developer audience. And for them, the cloud was this huge opportunity because it was a chance to rewrite the same solutions, but for a different target. You know? So completely different way of looking at it. And I just had published an editorial today about the death of version numbers and how as we move to web-based services, we don't think in terms of Windows 8, Windows 9. We think in terms of things like Windows Intune or Office 365, where there is no version number. It's just delivered. But of course, the sort of implicit part of that is that when you deliver online services to a corporation, there are people who used to support the on-premise versions of those solutions in-house who are no longer doing that. And so what happens to them? And unfortunately, that's always part of that conversation. And so, I think this is the rosy, happy answer you get from Microsoft. And then there's maybe the more realistic, real-world answer that you would get from Mary Jo and I. And I think that's really the point of it.
I mean, there's a lot of info that's going to be given at this event. And I think it's great that you guys are going to be there. You guys are going to talk. It's always... I could listen to you talk all day, Paul. I mean, I said that to Mary Jo, actually. We were sitting there and drinking, and we were talking about an email. Someone was yelling. He's like I was listening to the show, and I forgot you were on, like a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, I'm telling you, and I'm really honest about this. I love listening to Paul talk.
I cannot stand listening to the sound of my voice.
Oh, man. Because I'm so used to listening to your other podcast, Windows Weekly when you do it. So I just sit there and I listen.
I'm not as much of a fan. Thank you, I guess. I appreciate that. I mean, I always tell Mary Jo on Windows Weekly, you got to jump in there. It's like when it's Leo and I mean, we would talk anybody to death. And, she does obviously speak up for herself. And same thing for you here. I mean, it's like, I'm sorry.
I mean, I push through. I mean, we have, we're engaged in the conversation, but sometimes I just want to hear you talk, and you're going to be able to hear talk at Win Connections, October 29th to November 1st at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. You can save $100 by using Tech 100 when registering. That's Tech 100. You save $100. You get more information at winconnections.com. Also, I believe next week we're going to have Mary Jo on the show.
Oh, yeah?
So we'll go into detail about, what to expect at Win Connections
Is she going to come there?
I
Or is
don't
she
know.
going to Skype in?
You know, it would be pretty easy for her to come in here. I think that would be pretty cool if we get her in studio. I'm right by the train. I think. You know what? I'm going to send her an email. I'm going to see. I could pick her up from the station.
You know, when I post the shows to my site, I play the beginnings of them, and not every week, but almost. Well, you know, every so often. I literally will be doing I'm writing something while this thing is playing in the background, and what's coming through is me. And I just I almost have to scream like that, you know. I just can't stand it.
Thank you to Win Connections for sponsoring What the Tech. Now, I do want to go into there's two things. Should we go into the people waiting online in the funny video that I found, or should we go into what the analysts have been saying?
Okay, so I think there are two sides to this story. Right. First of all, the iPhone 5 is a huge success. There's
huge.
No,
yeah.
It's one of the best and fastest selling phones of all time, and will be, I'm sure, you know, when everything's said and done. The video you have depicts maybe why that is the case, because I think a lot of the people that buy these things are existing Apple customers who have bought every single iPhone that's come down the pike because they're that dumb and they just don't really think. But B, some of these people it has become like a circus event.
I know.
You know. Now, it puts me in a weird spot. I mean, in some ways it's cheap and easy to make fun of these people. So let's make fun of these people, shall we?
I thought it was hysterical. Sam Roberts from the Opie and Anthony show.
By the way, he's great.
Isn't he great?
He really is.
A really talented guy, and
I could not do this.
No, and the way he engages is amazing. But he does a show on Sirius, and he's part of the O&A show. He went online here in New York City at the Apple Store in Manhattan. I was there a couple days ago.
Yeah,
and I saw the people waiting online, but it was so soon. I just thought they were homeless.
I think I would just walk down the line and smack every one of them in the face.
All of them
at this point, you know.
So he went and he asked some questions on why they're there. Here's the video. Let me see if I could cue this up. There we go.
Not to talk about this piece of junk, the iPhone 4, but to find out what's the haps with the iPhone 5. We're here in the iPhone 5
this
line
guy
with
was great.
Joseph. Joseph, what's the haps?
We've been here since last Friday, and it's been amazing so far, the experience. Yeah, we have one more day to go.
What about the experience is so amazing? You guys have been living on the street in New York.
No, like, I don't know. I like meeting all these new people that ask us, oh, what have you been here for? What's the deal? Why are you waiting here for the iPhone? I don't know. I feel like a celebrity. It feels cool.
I feel like a celebrity.
You,
it feels cool. What's fascinating, he's wearing a Gazelle shirt.
The awesome thing about this part of the conversation is he talks about how homeless people also sit outside at night. But unlike you, they don't get to go home when they're done.
Yeah.
You know?
Here he is.
Some of you guys here, not you so much, but there are some people here that look very homeless-y, and they also get the experience of living on the street in New York through the homeless, but they're all miserable.
I'm not miserable. I'm happy because one more day, iPhone 5 is here. I mean, it does feel like we're homeless because I actually have a sleeping bag sleeping on the floor for the past week.
But generally speaking, homeless don't get iPhones when they're finished being homeless.
Exactly.
We're here on the iPhone 5 line with Rachel.
She's my favorite.
What's the haps?
Well,
by the way, let me point out, her purse, according to my wife, I forgot the brand. It's a very expensive brand, and it's probably over $1,000.
This woman is odd for a great number of reasons.
Great number of reasons.
And again, cheap and easy, but I think what we're seeing here is representative iPhone user.
Everybody wants a new version of iPhone 5, so we're waiting in line.
Now, some people decided to do this silly thing and order it on the internet. Why did you decide to wait online?
I don't want to get ripped off by the internet, so I decided to just wait in line.
Have you heard a lot of horror stories of the internet going and ripping people off?
That was the
Scams
best.
and stuff like that, so.
We're on the iPhone 5 line with Keenan. Keenan, what's the haps?
It's a couple of hours away until, not a couple of hours away, but less than 24 hours away until the iPhone 5 is released. And
this guy was interviewed by every New York City news, local news group.
For?
Since Thursday.
I assume because of his hair.
Yeah.
So a week today.
A week today.
What have you been doing?
hanging out, having fun, partying with these guys.
Do you think Gazelle paid these people to sit there?
No,
Because look, the chair is Gazelle, the shirt is Gazelle, and there's like another couple people wearing Gazelle shirts.
Yep.
You
not
think that?
coincidental? Yeah, no, it's not popular. I think.
Interesting.
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, Gazelle, they're the company that buys old equipment, right?
Old
so in other
equipment,
words, these guys are all going to be Gazelle customers in about 5 minutes because they're going to sell them their old iPhone 4S that they just are replacing out of contract so they can get the iPhone 5. By the way, I don't know if they're going to play this part of the video, and I'm actually not even positive it was this part of the video, but there's a point where he says that the difference between the iPhone 4S and the iPhone 5 is 1/3 of an inch.
Yeah, and it's worth getting. Yeah, it's on this one.
That is so awesome.
Guys, it's like a giant party. I've met more people here than I've ever met at any party.
You're
I've
pathetic.
met some people here that I wouldn't have met at a party normally too. We're here on the iPhone 5 line with Ryan from Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, this goes.
Occupy DC as well.
I didn't
everywhere.
I didn't know the occupiers liked iPhones.
I mean, there are we do, you know, there are some.
He has
people
no
that
idea
do
what to
use
say.
Them, you know, that are donated and stuff that use them for live stream and whatever.
And you guys are going to be the first to get the iPhone 5.
Oh no, we're not. None of us in this line are getting ready to buy the iPhone 5.
You're in a terrible location then. Now, you know, it is a smart thing to avoid the internet. What do you use your smartphone for, or what are you planning on using it for?
Texting messages to my friends.
Well, it's good to get an iPhone then. What are the features about the new iPhone that have you so excited?
I'm not sure because I haven't seen it yet, but
And that sums it all up.
Be,
There it is.
really
Everything you
cool
need to know about the
use,
iPhone line right
every day,
there.
like a laptop.
Sure. What influenced you to get on this line then?
Like everybody else that's waiting in line, we're just like really wanting to buy Apple phone 5.
They have nets outside of the buildings where they catch people because they're committing.
This guy was great, but that was, you can see the video. It's on YouTube. Just Google Sam Roberts iPhone 5.
He handles these people in such a way.
Yeah, this guy's a total pro.
I would have had a meltdown in front of that blonde woman. Like I would have literally fell to my knees and started crying. Like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah, but this guy's a total pro. He's been on the Opie and Anthony show for a long time. Really, really, really funny stuff. And the video had like 20,000 views yesterday, and it's exploded. It has over 100,000.
All I want to say is, for years and years and years, I listened to criticisms on the Windows side from Mac people saying that, well, yeah, you have all these extra users and everything, but every one of those people is a lemming and an idiot. And then I see this video and I think, wow, things really have changed, haven't they?
You know, most people don't even know why they're waiting online. I mean,
incredible.
And I've said that.
They love the social aspect of it.
They do.
You know, usually in my parents' basement, I don't see this many people, but now I can get out in the world and finally run into some other human beings who like the same things I do, i.e. anything with an Apple logo on it.
Exactly, and I've forever said, if you could order this online, I mean, you could pre-order it. You could buy it online
and have it delivered that day.
That day, I mean, a couple hours after it launches. I mean, depending on where you live.
One of the guy, you sent me the video earlier, and I brought my wife, and I said, you have to watch this. And the one that she pulled out, the quote that she thought was great, was the guy he said, "You've been out here for like since yesterday." He's like, "I mean, how can you stand being outside so long?" And he says, "Oh, it's all about patience." And my wife said, "If you have so much patience, why do you have to wait in line to buy this thing right now?"
I know.
You know,
amazing.
You got to have it now, but it's all about patience.
It was when I couldn't stop watching it yesterday. I watched it like 3 times.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'm just thinking, you know, I saw these people waiting there, and I couldn't put 2 and 2 together because I was there last Sunday. So this is 5 days prior to the device coming out. These people were there from last Thursday.
Sure, why wouldn't you be? There's no other way to get it that day.
I mean, just why? Why do you need?
I know.
And why do you need to be at that store? That's like the mecca of Apple stores.
But maybe that is why.
Maybe. You know, bizarre thing. I think I told you this last week. When I went to the Apple store, nobody spoke English in the store. Everybody was European. I guess it's like a big touristy place. People just want to go in the cube.
You know, no one who makes those phones speaks English either, Andrew.
No.
Which I think is another part of the problem, but
so, let's talk about the sales of this device. 5 million devices sold opening weekend.
Yeah.
And
opening,
Yeah.
Long weekend, yes, but
Long
yes.
weekend. And I found it fascinating how people were saying, well, this is a failure. It was estimated to sell 8 million devices, and it only sold 5.
Yeah. So, okay. Anytime something like this happens with Apple, the same suspects are always involved.
I think it was Piper Jeffries and
Gene Muster is always in there. He's always the wrongest of the wrong, But there's also this weird thing where you can't really criticize Apple, right? Because it's hard. First of all, and in this case, it's not justified at all. They sold 5 million of these things. I mean, it's incredible. But okay, but you'll always get feedback from people who say, well, they would have sold more. They just couldn't make them or enough. And then you'll have the Apple apologist stories where they'll say, a story has just emerged that the incredible high quality of the iPhone 5 screen means that they can't manufacture enough of these things quickly because it's so high quality. Like the excuses start happening. And it's like, guys, come on. They sold 5 million of these things. There's no such thing as this thing selling out. I just want to remind people, this thing, it didn't sell out. There wasn't no stoppage of the creation of these things. They get created continuously.
And they come in batches.
More of them come out every single day. I mean, that's ridiculous. So they sold as many as they could. I have no doubt that that's true. They sold a bajillion of them.
I mean, I'm sure Apple predicted they probably have around 5 to 6 million sales, and they sold 5 to 6 million units.
They're fine. They're doing fine. The problem is these guys, these analysts. And these people are a problem at 2 times. They're a problem when companies, Apple really. When Apple releases their quarterly earnings, they're a problem. Because what Apple does is Apple puts out quarterly earnings guidance ahead of time, where they say, this is how we think the quarter is going to go. And Apple always plays a game with that, where they put out really low guidance.
Yeah.
And even though these guys who are analysts, and I want you people to think about what that word means and what an analyst might do for a living, they don't ever actually do any analysis of those numbers based on the past and how Apple has always undercut their actual numbers. They just take them at face value. And that way Apple is able to come in way over estimates, because these guys will all come out with their estimates for how many iPhones, iPads, iPods, Macs, whatever, that Apple will sell.
Yeah, and they kind of do the opposite. They do the opposite too.
They always do this. Always.
I was watching CNBC the other day, and there was an analyst on, and it was saying, "Well, you know what? This is just what happens with Apple. They have one really strong quarter, and Samsung is going to beat them the rest of the year." And I'm like, that is not true.
Well, actually, that probably is true.
but you're comparing. Yeah. I'm like, but look at that comparison. Google's going to beat them the rest of the year. That's how. But they compared Android to iPhone.
They compared all of Android or all of Samsung to right. Well, the only that's true. I think the only issue there is that Apple has decided that the way they're going to market in the smartphone market is with a device. Over time, they've evolved their strategy because they're not going to sell multiple devices to keep selling previous devices and use those as lower end phones, right? So the way that, like we just talked about HTC is not going to continue selling the HTC Trophy, which is their previous generation Windows Phone device. And they're not going to keep it in the market and give it away for free. They're just going to sell out of it, and they're only going to sell their new phones. Only Apple continues to do this. Like this is because they only have one phone, right? And so this gives them a way to kind of compete in this market where every other player does it completely differently. So Apple chose this strategy. That was their choice. They could have multiple iPhones. I mean, I sort of made the argument, why don't they have an iPhone 5S? That's basically the same exact device, but with a smaller screen. So if you like the iPhone 4S size for whatever reason, you could get an iPhone 5 version of that. But they don't do that. They laser focus on this one thing. And so whatever, that's their choice. But unfortunately, when they do that, they have to, you have to make those comparisons. There's no way around it. I mean, so Samsung sells probably 117 different smartphones. Who knows? Samsung is a bigger maker of smartphones than is Apple. I mean, they just are. Will this iPhone 5 outsell any, one Samsung device? Maybe this quarter, probably. But, back in Q2, they didn't. The Galaxy S3 killed them. So
that's a problem when you're comparing iPhones to anything else. I think the most fair comparison would be Galaxy S3 versus iPhone 5.
Yeah,
but
sort of. It's like the Kindle thing. Remember, the Nexus 7 came out, and everyone said, "Oh man, this is so much better than the Kindle at Fire." Well, yeah, the Kindle Fire came out last November. I mean, yeah, of course it is. It's like 9 months later. I mean, so now the Kindle Fire HD comes out, and it's like, well, here's a comparison. Now we can say, like, now these things are comparable, right? I mean, the Samsung Galaxy S3 was better in some ways than the iPhone 4S. It's probably still better in some ways than the iPhone 5.
Did you read the article about the quality control issues that this device has?
The article about the quality?
Yeah.
You mean talk about the scraping thing?
The scraping and the fact that one of the guys that works in the plant or sweatshop that produces them said that like 10 out of every 100 are actually like perfectly made.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to attribute that to reality. All I can say is, Apple gets a pass in the media that other companies don't, and that the iPhone 4 especially had an endemic set of problems. The iPhone 4S absolutely had some problems. This one clearly has some problems. They get kind of a pass on it. They can ship a map app that doesn't actually help you find anything, and everyone's like, it's okay, it's Apple. I'll deal with it. It's no problem. Can you imagine the outrage if the Android Maps application was that bad, or if the the Microsoft one was? It would be a completely different story.
I could only compare. I'm running iOS 6 on my iPad too, and I have to tell you, the App Store is really sluggish.
Yeah.
The podcast app is awful, and the Maps feature is just abysmal. So
yeah, I think we can all agree the Maps app is a joke.
And the reply, obviously they're saying, well, it's a work in progress. It's the first version of it. We're starting from.
But that's Apple's fault.
Yeah.
In other words, you can't. You can't excuse it. Like, well, it's 1.0. It's okay. They'll fix it.
Well, you can't take away
they will
something.
Fix it, but it's still crap now. They're selling it.
But it would have made that answer would have made sense on the first iPhone. Yeah. Well, this is the first version of it, and we're working on it. Not 5 generations in.
I know, it's
and
crazy.
You had a perfect mapping app.
We had a perfect one before. It just kept getting better. Now we're competing with those guys. We're getting rid of it. Yikes. I mean, that's just kind of tough. That's all.
So
whatever.
Google,
you know what? I mean, all this stuff. You know what you're getting when you buy one of these things. I've always said that Apple in general and the iPhone in particular is the ultimate example of form over function. And when you scratch the back of this thing and complain, and the guy responds to you, well, it's aluminum. Anytime you have color-coded aluminum, you'll scratch and the original silver color will be seen underneath. I'm sorry, but this guy just framed that as the buyer's problem. Apple decided to make this thing out of that material, decided to color-code it, knew that it, like every other iPod and iPhone they've ever made, would scratch just by looking at it. And when someone had the temerity to complain, this guy positioned it as that problem, as that person's problem, not as a quality control problem with Apple.
Well, you should get a case. You should have gotten a case.
There is no case. Yeah. They don't sell a case.
Should put plastic on it. Just cellophane wrap the entire thing.
This story is a decade old almost now, but I always tell this. I was at a PDC in Los Angeles. I had some new the iPhone. It must have been the iPod Nano had come out. Maybe the original one. It was really cool looking, a really nice little device. Still looks beautiful today. And I had it shipped to my hotel room. I took it out and I put it on the ottoman in the hotel room. I took some photos of it. I flipped it over to take photos of the back, and it was scratched.
Brand new.
Right out of the box. And it's like, you have got to be kidding me. But that's what these things are always like. And these experiences that people have where the screen's yellow, or the corners crack where the screws are, or the coating on the aluminum body is flaking off, and now they see the color that's on it. This is, or the antenna doesn't work, or whatever it is. It's like this company makes arbitrary design decisions, sells them as a feature, as something beautiful that people can own, like this museum piece, and then when you use it in the real world, that's what happens. How could they not have known that this would happen?
Well, do you think this is the cracks are beginning to show its life after Steve Jobs? I mean, do you think
actually this has been going on. This has always happened. None of this is new. There isn't a single thing I can point to and say this never would have happened under Steve Jobs. This map thing, as bad as it is sort of just like when Mobile Me launched, and that was a big thing that Steve Jobs did, And by the way, Mobile Me much like app maps maybe eventually, was actually a really good idea. If you go back and look what I wrote about it at the time, this guy was bringing exchange to the masses, and was charging for it, which I think we eventually realized was a bad idea. But it was a good idea. It just wasn't implemented well. But you could tell it's software. They'll fix it, and they did. They did fix it. They fixed it, but then they renamed it because MobileMe had to stink at death about it. But they got it right eventually. But Steve Jobs did MobileMe, so this is not. It's a little easy to say he's gone and see what's happening.
I don't know. When you hear these stories, I feel like this iPhone had more criticism than any of the other ones in prior years.
But I think the reason we can, I guess the explanation for that would be Apple has only grown in popularity every year. Those people, we make fun of these people staying in line. We don't even know why we're in line. Apple has some new thing out. I'm just going to buy it. I don't even know what it is.
And that works great for them.
By the way, those people exist. They just exist. I'm not actually claiming that they're the majority of the user base or whatever. But what that tells you is that Apple started as this kind of niche company that made Mac computers for a very small number of people, and then they got into music and iPods and phones and iPads, and this is still going up and up and up and up and up. And this is just it's not just mass market. Now their customer is everybody.
Well, I always said this. They have one of the best PR departments in the world because they've convinced people to buy a product they don't even know what it's doing.
No,
and they don't even know why they want it, and they've convinced people.
True. But but the point is, there are people who buy into the whole Apple thing. But then there are just people, and they buy into the app. They're sort of buying into the Apple thing because they've heard about it from other people. Everyone tells them how great it is. They read some review somewhere that it's unclear how they could have reviewed it in such a short period of time and actually have no idea how it really works or will perform in the real world. But they do, and they give it a high score. And then they buy the thing, and they're like, well, I can't actually get a signal when I hold it in my hand the normal way I would hold it in the case of the iPhone 4. Or in the case of this thing, it's like I put it down on the table and it scratched the back, and now I can see silver underneath the actual color of the device. What's going on? And the reason you're hearing the complaints now is because the Apple faithful used to cover that stuff up. You were shut down and shouted down if you tried to complain about them in the past. But now they'd reach the whole world, and you can't shout down the whole world anymore. You're going to hear those complaints. I actually don't think this is any different than it's ever been. I just think they're reaching a bigger audience.
They are, and the fact of the matter is people buy the products. Initially, some people really like it and they feel comfortable with it, but initially people buy it because they're pretty devices.
And by the way, it's beautiful.
That's why.
There's no doubt about it.
They really are. They're great-looking devices, and
the
just
operating
now,
system is borderline retarded. I actually have. I don't. It's almost gotten to the point where you almost can't call it a smartphone OS. It's so behind the times. But, whatever. That's software. They will fix that, just like they'll fix maps. They'll get there.
Sure.
It will absolutely get there.
And people play catch up again.
Here's one thing no one's talked about. Tell me if you've noticed this. Apple, who was often held up as some kind of design apex, if you look at the apps that are in iOS 6, they're all over the map. They're all different colors, different layouts. Like I should make a panorama or a kind of a grid of these apps. Like pick the apps that were made by Apple and include, like, they're all different. Some of the color schemes are from iOS 5. Some of them are that new kind of gray color scheme. I mean, it's really kind of bizarre.
I'm seeing. I got distracted by the chat room, which I never do actually.
See what happens.
Yeah, The Verge. Intel CEO reporting claims Windows 8 is being released before it's ready.
Yeah, that's wow. If only someone else had made that claim earlier.
Yeah, I just saw it. We have two things to get to. We're going to play the What If game.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a really cool What If. A viewer sent it in, so I don't take credit for this. And of course, we need to talk about our Audible pick of the week, Paul. From Audible.com. Paul, we haven't done it in a couple of weeks. Let me just pull it up here in the show notes. You have a really cool Audible pick of the week. Why don't you go into it?
Yeah, someone had asked me a few weeks back, were there any new World War II books, and it seemed like early this year and then late last year, there was just a period of time where we had a bunch of these great new World War II books. And this one just came out. So it's called The Second World War, so it should be really easy to find. but it's by Anthony Beaver, who's written many books about World War II. I think he wrote one called D-Day and several others whose names I'm now forgetting. But what he's doing in this book, which is much the case of some of these other books we talked about in the past, is he's covering the entire war, and he's kind of re-examining everything, as people do as more time goes by and more information becomes available and so forth. And this is an awesome book. I mean, so some of the stuff, I'll just give you two of the things that are in here that kind of in the vein of rethinking things, right? The first one is, when does World War II start? You know, there's this school of thought that says, well, World War I and World War II are actually the same conflict, and that World War I, you know, it kind of came to a close, but the issues from it were never resolved, and it boiled over into World War II. And that's fair enough, except that World War II actually includes a lot of stuff that happened in China and Eastern Russia and Japan and, of course, the Pacific Rim and everything.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but World War II technically started in 1939 when they invaded Poland and England and France declared war on Germany.
Yeah, so that's that's the Western view of when World War II started. But what this guy says is it actually started before that, when China, originally it was a conflict involving China, Russia, and Japan. And Japan and China were at war for some period of time. And so one of the opening scenes of the book is this time, I don't remember the exact date, but it was earlier than the German invasion of Poland, where Japan basically decided they needed to invade China, you know, and they were involved in a multi-year war in China, which this guy says really was the start of World War II. And there's all kinds of screwy alliances, and there's a lot of information in here about, you know, Hitler's actual plans for dealing with the Jews, which of course is obviously a central issue of World War II. And
well, yeah, you know what's interesting? I was reading a blog post about that, and they were saying that was his like oh shit plan. Like,
yeah,
it was.
Well, no, I mean, in other words, you know, he wanted to expand Germany, right, to make it bigger and to eat into the natural resources of other places, obviously. And he wanted the Jews gone. There's no denying.
Yeah,
this.
there's no denying that.
But his original plan was literally for them to walk away and
yeah.
go somewhere else. I mean, that was his original. You know, he really didn't. He never thought through we're going to kill all the Jews. You know, that's what we're going to do. And then next we'll kill the gypsies and the, you know, the mentally retarded and, you know, whoever else. I mean, like that was not really his plan. It's also, you know, there's always been kind of a weird deal with Hitler and the senior leadership of the Nazis in that they were proposing this kind of Aryan master race thing, and none of those guys were Aryan in any way. I mean, think about the, you know, like a beautiful, tall, muscular blonde guy, and then look at this kind of rogues gallery of Nazi leaders. They were all like hunchbacks and, you know, stilted little freaks.
And it was a very misused terminology for Aryan.
Oh, they would take over places and just kind of cherry pick people in the population and say, well, you meet our vague criteria for Aryan.
You know, the Aryan race, technically Persians, you know, Indians, and you know, from India, not Indians, and actually Armenians are Aryan.
Sure.
So
yes,
I'm
not the Nazi idea.
Not the Nazi Aryan. No, I'm definitely not blonde, blue-eyed.
So anyway, it's yet another book about World War II. Yes, but you know, God, we've been very lucky the last couple of years. There have been many fantastic books, and this is a ginormous book. It is really big.
It's actually, I'm going to play a clip of it because I'm going to download this.
I have this request. It began. Do not give in to sniveling. Keep steady and try with dignity to endure the unpleasant separation honestly. But when Zhukov reached Moscow by train the next day, he was not arrested or taken to the Lubyanka prison. He was told to report to the Kremlin to see Stalin's old crony from the 1st Cavalry Army in the Civil War, Marshal Kliment Voroshilov, now the People's Commissar of Defense. During the purge,
I'm going to get this because I've gotten into my World War II kick again. I was reading about Hitler's drug addiction. He was a drug addict.
Sure.
And for years, he was pumped with methamphetamines and pain pills.
Well, he was obsessed with dying. He launched the war against Poland when he did, because he said, I need to do this now when I'm relatively young, because if I wait 10 years, I'm not going to be around to see this happen, and I have to be the one that does this.
Yeah, he had Parkinson's.
He was convinced, yeah.
I mean, he had Parkinson's. He had, allegedly, he might have had gone. Why am I saying allegedly like I'm going to get sued? He could have possibly had gonorrhea.
Sure.
Which he declared the Jew disease. He claimed that in his book, in Mein Kampf, he says that gonorrhea is the disease of the Jews. And, how ironic that he may have had gonorrhea. So there's a lot of these. I mean, the psychology.
A delightful grandfatherly man.
God.
Really. I mean.
His family lives on Long Island. Yeah, there was a whole thing. They escaped. They denounced them. One of the guys, I think one of his nephews actually joined the U.S. military and fought the war against them, and they live out in Long Island in New York. It's quite interesting. But audible.com, guys, audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. Get your free audiobook. Really cool stuff. I'm really interested in this, and I'm going to try to buy it now.
It's a good one.
Jessica and I share the same Audible account. And you'll see, like, she'll be like housewife, Bethany Frankel's, like, how to stay fit in 10 days. Like, that'll be the audiobook she got. And mine is like Hitler's Last Stand.
Yeah, you can always.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's so bipolar. Like, it's either dieting or like Hitler. It says a lot about us.
It's awesome.
Really, really cool stuff. We should do a show just on like World War II one day. Yeah. Let's talk about World War II stuff, because I could talk about this
I'd have to research it, because there's so much awesome stuff. Even that little segment you played was this Zhukov guy was heading back to meet with Stalin, and he knew he was going to be sent to a death camp, or like everyone in the senior military leadership in Russia was being purged, because Stalin was so just convinced that anyone of any quality had to be removed because they were a potential threat.
Yeah, and there's so many of these, crazy, crazy stories.
Oh, it's nuts. The whole thing is, it's obviously it's nuts. I mean, it was literally a world war, but the way things deteriorate everywhere is just absolutely insane. It really is insane.
Like I said, I got into this kick last weekend, and I just spent like the entire day just researching World War II stuff, and I was reading about this Polish journalist that broke into a concentration camp, and he stayed there, and he broke out of it somehow.
Yeah.
And based on his accounts, like, it helped the war. Like, we found out about what was going on, and it was like one of the first exposés on what had happened. Really interesting stuff. We should do this in the coming weeks, because I could talk about this for hours. The what if of the week, Paul. This is something that you've brought up many times on Windows Weekly. Yeah. I've gotten this question a bunch of times from viewers, and the what if is, what if Zune software was available on all platforms?
Yep.
I guess by all platforms, we're talking about, obviously, Mac and Windows. I don't think we care about Linux, right? No, we don't. But
I had to think about that for a second. No,
and I could take that what if farther. My thing would have been, what if they made the Zune software the Windows media player? Just like how iTunes is the media player for the Mac, it should have been Zune software should have been the media player for Windows. So take it from there, Paul. What do you think would have happened?
Well, right. So I had made this argument years ago that if Microsoft was serious about the Zune platform, which is now going away, and what they would have done is release native clients on everything. So there would have been a Mac client, there would have been an iOS client, there would have been an Android client, right? The point being that if you want to subscribe to Zune Pass, which will become Xbox Music Pass, that you will be able to have access to this music anywhere, And they have this kind of web client that they offer you that, it works okay. But, I mean, they just never really took that extra step. And it's that kind of lack of fortitude that has always made me dither a little bit about the Microsoft Media stuff. Because, they had they've had a series of strategies over the years, but a variety of things that they did through the Windows Media division, and then through Plays for Sure and so forth. And then it seemed like they were kind of going all in with Zune, but they never pushed it beyond Windows. And I just always felt like that was a huge mistake. Now, I'm not claiming that they would have made any dramatic inroads against iTunes or whatever. I think one of the things that was very striking about that Apple event where they announced the iPhone and the new iPods was how sort of out of date it seemed that they would even talk about iTunes, the application. It was so bizarre to me that they spent time on iTunes. It just seems like something that people don't really do anymore on a PC or Mac, really. That I've even looked at my own system. It's funny. In front of me, I have large screen display, tower computer, get an Xbox sitting over here and everything. And I no longer copy my entire music collection to my PC. It is up on a server. I've got, Amazon Cloud Player. I've got Zune Pass. I sort of don't even really need it anymore. And the truth is, this isn't really where I need it anyway. I need it out in my living room. It'd be nice if you had like a mobile phone. You could play it in the kitchen through speakers or something, which we do. But for us to do that, we have to do it through Windows Phone. Obviously some people still have Zune devices, but most people don't, and most people never will. So it's still even though they're rebranding it as Xbox, it's still a fairly limited audience if your intention is only to market this at Microsoft guys, that they need to reach the entire world. And I don't know how to predict, what could have changed. I mean, if they had been there, other than to say that they would have been much better positioned for this transition to Xbox branding.
Yeah.
In that people with an iPhone, people with an iPad, people with a Galaxy S3, whatever, I think would be excited to have an awesome Xbox music player. That there is an audience for that. I really do think that there is. And I think that's a huge opportunity missed. And I don't think that the move to Xbox brand is going to do much to, change that.
Well, do you feel that's because the Windows users are not familiar with Zune or the Zune software? I mean, every Mac user knows what iTunes is. I can't say the same for Windows. I don't even think most Windows users know what Zune is.
They dithered for so long that Windows 7 came out and they still had Windows Media Player. And rather than just kind of building a few of the important features of that thing into the Zune client and making that the client, like why wouldn't you just have that thing in your system? Even Windows 8 ships with basically the exact same version of Windows Media Player from before. It does have an Xbox Music client, right, which is a Metro apps, and so spiritually it's sort of the successor to the Zune stuff, but not really. I mean, I just don't think it's ever going to be a big deal, Maybe it doesn't matter in some ways. If you're going to buy music, obviously you can buy music from anywhere. I just today bought some music on Amazon MP3, but I went and looked at iTunes just to see if it was cheaper and to see if they had some additional songs, as happens sometimes with new music.
But see, most people just buy it using whatever is there. I buy stuff on iTunes, and you know why I do? Because it's right there.
Yeah.
And it's easy. Okay, buy. Done.
Well, but what's even better than that, though, ultimately, and I was just thinking about this today as I made this purchase through Amazon, and when you do that, it says, do you want to download this now, or do you want us just to pump this into your cloud drive? Just put it in the cloud drive. And it occurred to me that I may never download this music, There is no Amazon MP3 player on Windows Phone, which blows, and hopefully that changes. But this thing is available on Android. It is available on iOS. And it works great on both of those platforms. That cross-platform functionality is what puts that thing over the top. It's why iTunes is so successful. Imagine how useless iTunes would have been if they had never put it on Windows.
I remember the first year that it came out, it was Mac only.
Yeah, and so 65,000 people used it, and then they put it on Windows, and it became 18 million people or whatever. So, that's how that happens. And today, obviously, we're in a different world. So there are millions and millions of people out there with Android devices of all kinds, with iPads and iPhones of all kinds. That's where you need to be there. You just need to be there. And every day that they're not there is another day that tells me that they're not serious about this. And it makes me doubt my choice of using that stuff, because I don't trust. If they don't feel so strongly about it that they don't put it on these competing platforms, why would I trust them?
Yeah. I don't think it would have made a major difference in the end.
Yeah.
But I do feel that Zune software should have been the primary media player for Windows.
Yep, I did too.
And obviously that's not the case, because I thought the Zune software was really good.
I did too. And nice logo, nice brand,
nice looking. Yeah.
It just was the right thing to do.
Everything was there. Podcasts were there. Everything. It was a great piece of software, and it's sad to see it go. I don't know what they're gonna do now, but hopefully maybe something. We'll see. By the way, I stand corrected. Hitler did not have gonorrhea. It was syphilis. It was syphilis.
Syphilis. Okay.
Yeah, that was the disease. Not
I guarantee
gonorrhea.
you that one of his henchmen had that.
Yeah, somebody had syphilis.
It was.
Somebody had
It was like a meetup of Batman villains. You know, like the Nazi high leadership was so
God.
crazy.
I totally forgot about the Wii U theory from last week.
What's up?
We were supposed to talk about the Wii U.
Oh no.
And I totally forgot all about it, and we got to wrap it up.
What's the Wii U theory?
Do you have time?
No, but just tell me what it is.
I don't even remember.
Oh.
I'm going to be honest. I was going to BS something. I don't even remember what I was going to say about the Wii U.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I did not read this, but I saw a headline that supposedly the Wii U is not as powerful as either the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3, both of which have been in the market for like 7-8 years, depending on which one you're talking about.
Yeah. You know what? Next week, I promise we'll talk about the Wii U. I promise. I'll put it in the notes right now.
Okay.
We'll talk about the Wii U. Go to our website, gfknetwork.com. If you miss any portion of the show, you could follow me on Twitter at Andrew Zarian. You could follow Paul on Twitter at Thurrott. He has a lot to say, and so do I. You could also go to Paul's website, winsupersite.com. He also does a great podcast every Thursday at 2 p.m. East. I don't know why I was going to say Wednesday. It's Thursday. Windows Weekly on the Twit Network. Windows Weekly is the show. Also, the show's posted on Windows Weekly. Also, What the Tech is posted there also. And I guess send us your emails for the 10-year game and for the what ifs. So send them in, guysfromqueens@gmail.com. And we'll see you all next week, guys. Good night.